Hello, Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Today is one of the more relevant episodes I've done, especially if you have children, but really this applies to everyone. There is a hidden poison that serves no good whatsoever that is in our food, and you can, through listening to this episode today, you will start to learn how to avoid this easily. You can easily avoid it when you know about it. Stay tuned. You'll want to be sharing this episode with your friends, your family, especially those who have children, especially for those who have children that have learning issues, behavioral issues. This actually affects the brain, and it's night and day. When we stop feeding this to kids, they become happy, calmer, able to handle their emotions, able to process emotions, able to learn, sit still, just be happier and more peaceful and healthier in their body. Really, there have even been people misdiagnosed with mental issues, mental illness, and with things like bipolar, who actually had a sensitivity to this chemical additive in food. Can you imagine feeling like you're losing your mind and being misdiagnosed, all the while you've been poisoned by food that we trusted our government to tell us was safe? And so we go in for that. We go into that today. We go into talking about why was this approved in the first place and what we can do about it and how we can easily get rid of it. I graduated from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and became an integrative health coach. And it was a wonderful program, really transformative, life-changing program. About half the people that take this online course end up doing it just for their own personal transformation. So if you're someone who loves learning, or you're sick of being sick and you want to learn about how to create holistic health in your life, and you want to go deeper, especially with a community, you definitely want to check out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition right now. I want you to go to learntruehealth.com/coach. That's learntruehealth.com/coach. It's a brand new sample class that they're giving away for free. I've been promoting this link for years because they had an old sample class, which I loved, and they've updated all their curriculums. They have all new instructors, and they've added a lot of information to their course. They're, of course, evolving as new health information comes out, even though it's holistic health, right? New information comes out. We have to upgrade, we have to update and stay relevant and stay current. And that's what they're doing. So check out the new sample class. Even if you've paid attention to the old sample class, it's free. You're going to learn something. Might as well jump in and check it out. So go to learntruehealth.com/coach. That's learntruehealth.com/coach. About half the people that take it either want to become a health coach or want to add these tools to their already existing repertoire. So there's a lot of practitioners that listen to this group, whether you're a nurse, an acupuncturist, a massage therapist, a counselor, mental health counselor, therapist, doctor, naturopath, chiropractor. You will gain a set of tools that'll deepen your ability to help people, to guide people and coach them to better health. But if you don't want to work with people and you just want to dive in for your own personal benefit, that's cool too. It really is for both. You will grow, you and your entire family, because you'll start sharing things, and the way you cook and the lifestyle changes you make, every aspect of your life will be enriched from this program. So I'm a big believer in it. And right now you will get a huge savings. The class starts September 23rd. So you want to jump on it. If you're interested, check out the free sample class, learntruehealth.com/coach. If you want to dive in, make sure you contact them. You can do it online, and you can also call them in person. If you do it online, make sure that you use the coupon code LTH, because you're going to receive a very large discount. I negotiated the biggest discount that they give anyone for my wonderful listeners. If September 23rd has come and gone, don't worry, because they start up new cohorts of students several times a year. Jump into the program no matter when it is. When you're ready to sign up, they unlock the beginning of the course. So you begin your course no matter what, but then your whole cohort works together online. And the biggest thing you need to know is that this was designed to fit within the very busy lifestyle of a working mom. Now, you might be a dad or you might be a single person. Either way, a very busy working mom, which I am, we have almost no time for ourselves. That they thought, who's the busiest person in the world and has the most responsibilities? And then they designed it so that the busy working mom could learn and grow and complete this curriculum. So it's about 20 minutes a day for a year, or you can do, and sometimes it's a little bit more, a little bit less, give or take, or you can do their 6-month accelerated program. And that is, I would say, dedicate 40 minutes to an hour a day. So that's more for what they call a full-time student, someone who can really sit down an hour a day for 6 months. Good news is, if you're really busy, choose the year-long program. It's a year of transformation. And isn't that wonderful? And there were times I was super busy. I missed a few days. And so I would just take like Sunday afternoons and catch up from with all the lessons. So it's flexible. It fits within your schedule. And it is really a wonderful personal growth and transformation experience. So be sure to go to learntruehealth.com/coach, check out the free sample class, and remember to use my coupon code LTH. Thank you for sharing this podcast with those you care about. It's going to make a huge difference. And I look forward to seeing how this ripple turns into a tidal wave and how in the coming months and years, we actually will change the food industry because we will share this information and we will vote with our fork and we will vote with our wallet. And by doing so, we will force the food industry to make changes. Enjoy today's interview. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 530. I am so excited for today's guests. We have Whitney and Brandon Cawood on the show. They are the creators of To Die For, the documentary. And this is going to be so important for, I think, everyone to listen to, especially Americans, because we're one of the countries that just has the worst in terms of artificial dye in our food. It's ubiquitous. It is crazy. I'm a label reader, and I'm surprised that there aren't more of us like food detectives out there. It drives my husband nuts. When we grocery shop, it takes me like 90 minutes because if I do go down the aisles to buy packaged food, I'm very picky. I will read every single label, and I cannot tell you how amazing it is just how much absolute garbage people are feeding their children, people are feeding themselves, and we think, oh, it's a treat. Why don't you just treat the kids? Why don't you just, I hear this from other people, like other moms and grandmas. Oh, come on, you're hurting them. They're not having a normal childhood experience because they're not allowed to have the same food that the other kids have. And I look at disease rates, and if you want to be like an average American, right? 1 in 3 diabetes, 1 in 3 obesity, morbidly obese, right? 1 in 3 have cancer, and it's growing. Look at what we die of. Look at what our children suffer from. Look at the health statistics. If you want to be like that, and if you want your children to be like that, then eat how everyone else is eating. But if you want your kids to have better health than the average child, if you want your kids to bounce back quickly from colds, you want them to be able to pay attention in class and their brain not to be on fire from artificial chemicals in food. You want them to be able to focus and enjoy learning and enjoy spending time with their friends and not be disruptive in class because their brain is on fire. Then you need to read labels and you need to be more discerning. You have to go upstream. You have to be the black sheep. You cannot have your grocery cart look like everyone else's grocery cart. And this is where Whitney and Brandon Cawood come in. I'm so excited for your documentary. It's coming out in the next few months. And listeners, I want you to make sure that you go to todieforthedocumentary.com. The links to everything that the Cawoods do is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. Listeners can go and sign up for their mailing list. Definitely check them out on Instagram. We're going to make sure your Instagram information is in the show notes as well, because your Instagram is insane. It's so relevant. It's so informative. it's so educational when it comes to those visuals of seeing, oh, I didn't know that food, I feed that food to my kids, or my mom fed that to me, and look what's in it. And look what it's doing. It's harming us. And you're bringing light to something that so many of us do not, we're not aware of. I have a friend who would die if she ate yellow dye. She has an anaphylactic, and that's really odd, an anaphylactic allergy to yellow dye. What is going on with artificial dyes that someone could actually die from eating it? So, anyways, I've spoken enough. Whitney, Brandon, it's wonderful to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. I'm
Absolutely.
excited.
Yeah. So take us back to the beginning. Like what, a young couple in Georgia all of a sudden becomes producers of a documentary. Like what happened in your lives that made you become aware of synthetic dyes and how dangerous they are for our children and for our brain and for our health?
Yeah, so we have 2 children. We have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. But when our oldest was around ages 2 and 3, he was really having a lot of trouble with impulse control, aggression, hitting, meltdowns, just could not cope with just like anything that doesn't go his way, basically. And a lot of that sounds normal to parents that are listening. They're like, yeah, I've had a kid that's that age and that happens. But it wasn't normal in that at the frequency that it was happening and the amount of issues that we were having. He was going to a Mother's Morning Out program, which is like a half-day program from like 9 to 11:30. And he was just going like 2 or 3 days a week. And I was having to pick him up every day. We were having notes home every single day. Every time we went to church, every time we went on a play date, like it was an issue that was really, really affecting our lives. And it was really affecting him and his relationships with children and teachers. And it was just really heartbreaking to watch. And I'm a former teacher, so I was just mortified that I had a child that was struggling so much and that we didn't know how to help him. So, we were eventually asked to leave his half-day daycare. And, around that same time, we were trying to figure out what can we do to help him. We had him in behavior therapy. We were doing everything that we could at that point. And finally, I decided to go on the internet and just try to find out if like our diet could be affecting, our mental health. I have several food allergies, so I have done an elimination diet before, and I've known how powerful that can be to your health. And so I found an article that suggested eliminating wheat, dairy, and synthetic dyes. And so I took those out of his diet. And just 48 hours later, the hitting and the tantrums, it almost completely stopped. I mean, it took care of 98% of our issues. And the other 2%, it was like, okay, we could slow down and we could talk through it. And like learning happened and things just started happening so quickly. And so we reintroduced wheat and it had no effect. We reintroduced dairy and it had no effect. We reintroduced dyes, and within 15 minutes, that child that we would occasionally see like glimpses, like whenever he was on the dyes, we would have days where it was really, really bad, and most of the days were really bad, but then we'd have days that were really good. And so anyway, when we reintroduced the dyes, that child that we had that was really good on those days, we had that child for 30 days straight. And so
when we eliminated the dyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, the craziest part about that is the only place that he was regularly getting synthetic dyes daily was his daily allergy medicine. He also had chronic ear infection, so he was on kind of an amoxicillin red loop. But he was already doing like mostly organic snacks and like the good stuff. So we were really shocked that something that we were giving him could affect his behavior and his well-being so dramatically. And so fast forward, he's done public school, pre-K, in kindergarten. Now he's in first grade. And I quite literally, he has quite literally not had a time where he's hit anyone, where he has been upset. He's never cried at school. He is just, it's the picture perfect child. I mean, he's not perfect, of course, like he's a little boy, but like we don't have behavior problems. We don't have an RTI. He's just a normal, very, very smart, very successful, very, very kind and compassionate child. And so to go from a child that was having so many issues to a child that is doing so well and is so successful, we were shocked. And so we decided that Well, first of all, we didn't know why. Like, why would something that we were eating affect, your mind so much? So I went down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out what's going on. And I was looking into the research and digging in, and I was really confused. I have a degree in education, so I could not decode the jargon in these scientific research articles. So I really wanted to go to researchers and ask the questions to try to figure out what was going on. And so my husband has a background in film. Well, not documentaries, but in short form film, like commercials. And so I asked him if he would be willing to document our journey and to go with me to interview these researchers and families. And reluctantly, he agreed.
I think I threw you off. She was in the middle of saying after the elimination diet, it was 30 days long, and she reintroduced wheat and nothing changed, and reintroduced dairy, nothing changed. But when we did reintroduce the dye, within 15 minutes, the bad behavior started back up again. So we knew pretty quickly that was the cause. I think I threw you off when you were telling that part of the story.
No. You did. You actually did say it was 15 minutes. And that's something that I have heard. There was this doctor back in the 90s. There's this clip. It was one of those, the Donahue show, or it was one of those, daytime talk shows. And this doctor came on, and this clip I've found on YouTube, and if I find it again, I'll put it in the show notes. But it's this doctor. I think she might be German. I think I seem to remember an accent. And she took children and gave them something they're allergic to, and then within 15 minutes, they were biting, kicking, pulling hair, screaming. It looked like they were possessed, and they went from super sweet to their brains on fire.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize that there are chemicals in our food that cross the blood-brain barrier that are excitotoxins that inflame the nerves. And then we just take the kid to the doctor, and the doctor puts them on meds to make them docile and behave themselves. We're just medicating this huge population of children that we're poisoning, and then poisoning further by trying to suppress this behavior, these symptoms, when it's the food that's doing it. And that is just so sad.
Mm-hmm. I think too, whenever we first kind of realized that he was having this kind of reaction, we thought it was probably kind of rare, and we thought that we were kind of on this island of Whitney didn't even think that people would believe her if she told this story. But so around the same time that we started kicking around the idea of doing this documentary, Whitney also started a Facebook group that we run. It's more broad based about synthetic dyes in general. It's not necessarily about the film. But
it's brought to you by our film page.
We started
Nice.
that page, and within the 2 years that we've been working on the film, that page has grown from 0 to 580,000 people. So
nice.
as we're building this film and we're deciding how we're going to do it, we're getting all this affirmation that, okay, there are people out there who are going through similar things. This isn't as rare as we thought it is. And so we've just heard story after story after story, similar to ours or worse than ours, or, some of them aren't as extreme, but just to see that there's so many people being affected really kind of fueled our fire. And we have to get this information out there, because if this many people are being affected, that's probably just a small fraction of the people that it truly is being affected, because they're the people who have figured it out. So how many people don't know this is affecting their child? So that really kind of gave us some fuel to keep going, and through the tough times and the challenging times of creating a documentary with two people, but it all made it worth it.
And what you guys are also showing, especially through your social media, is that your children, hey, if you want to feed your kids junk food, if you want to feed your kids processed crap, you can still feed them processed. You can still feed them sugar. You can still feed them artificial treats. There are a whole bunch of dye-free or natural dye alternatives. One of my son's favorites, he gets them once a year, is the no-nos, and they're little candies that are there's no dairy, no gluten, no dye. That's why they're called no-nos, but they're like
Yeah.
these little chocolate
We get
covered
those too.
candies, and kind of like M&Ms, a
Yep.
little bit like M&Ms. And he he loves them, but I'm big at really limiting processed food and sugar. But when you go down this rabbit hole, you start to wake up to, wow, maybe I shouldn't be filling my kids' lunchbox with foods that wouldn't expire in the next 25 years and wouldn't, if you just left the foods out of their package, that mold won't even eat it. You know, if mold won't
Yeah.
even eat the food that you're feeding your kid, like its gut microbiome can't eat it for sure. And you're not giving your children living food, you know, to feed
Right.
their cells. So there's that catch-22. Like when you start to go down the rabbit hole of eliminating dye, you might also start eliminating just processed foods in general, or
Yes.
limiting
It's true.
them. Which then there's additional added health benefits, because what are you going to replace it with? Whole foods. Maybe give your kid more fruit,
Exactly.
something alive, something full of vitamins and fiber. And there's over 1,000 chemical compounds in fruit that fights cancer and helps the body, helps the immune system of the body. And you know, that's nature's candy. So forget about dye. Like let's feed our kids real food. But you know, not everyone is willing to take that step, or we're just sort of waking people up to like, hey, how about instead of these Oreos, you buy these alternative Oreo like cookies that don't have dye.
Right.
Yes.
And it actually really surprised me when I saw that there's like blue dye in Oreos. I'm like, what the crap? What are we feeding our kids? Start reading the labels of stuff and it will surprise you. There's only one cereal I will give my child because there's nothing in it. It's just rice. There's nothing else in it. It's really hard to find, and it's organic, but it's really hard to find a good healthy cereal with no sugar, with no artificial crap in it. And then you start going down that rabbit hole of like, wow, what have I been eating? What have I been feeding my kids? So I'm sure you've been diving down this rabbit hole. I do have a few more questions. Your second child, have you done this experiment? Have you run the experiment and fed your second child dye to see if they react in a similar fashion?
We have actually, and she does not seem like she reacts, at least not to the extent that he does. I mean, we tested twice maybe, and she's 3, but she
Yeah.
doesn't seem to have the same reaction. But we know now, knowing what we know now, like we don't avoid dyes just because of the neurologic impacts. Like they have dramatic impacts on our health in general. No one should be consuming synthetic dyes. And so just the fact that some of them are linked to cancer, some of them, Red 40 can increase your susceptibility to colitis. Yellow 5 and yellow 6 may contain carcinogenic components. Many people have allergic reactions to yellow 5, yellow 6, and red 40. Red 3 and yellow 5 are genotoxic or can be genotoxic. And red 3 we know causes cancer in animals.
Even the
And
FDA says that.
Yeah, on the FDA's
that sick?
website, it says that red 3 causes cancer in animals.
and it's banned in cosmetics and externally applied drugs, but not in food.
And so there's so many reasons to avoid synthetic dyes. And to your point that you were making earlier, in our group, we only talk about synthetic dyes. And the reason why that is because that first step is like you said, can be really intimidating for people. Someone that has never read a label, this is a really good first step to looking at ingredients. And once you know synthetic dyes are a chemical, that chemicals can affect you in so many negative ways, you really do go down that rabbit hole. And we've seen it time and time and time again. Synthetic dyes are kind of like a gateway drug in that you start really reading ingredients and you become concerned about your health, and then you're eating more whole foods, and then you're looking at products that are applied dermally, and then you're looking at, you know what I mean? Your eyes are really open to how the way we conduct our life and the things that we eat can really impact our health long term. And so we think that it's a really great place to start. And so although our film focuses on synthetic dyes, we do touch on the fact that there are thousands of chemicals in our food that have not been tested or have been tested by these companies. And so although we know that there's more issues than synthetic dyes, we just really think that it's a great place to start and just a really good first step.
Well, then also like synthetic dyes are a huge part of our story. So like eliminating dyes changed our family's dynamics so much, and like kind of say we feel like it changed the trajectory of our son's life. So But then also you start looking at synthetic dyes. Like the crazy thing about synthetic dyes are they are completely cosmetic. Like there's no preservative value, there's no flavor, there's no, it doesn't add any shelf life. It doesn't do anything except for make the food look different. And like it's hard. I'm hard to even think of any other additive that has no purpose other than something cosmetic. So it's aside from the issues and the dangers and all the problems they can cause, it's like completely unnecessary. There's no reason for it other than just to use it for marketing and attract people and attract kids and things like that.
And then on top of that, dyes are often used to make unhealthy foods visually appealing, and so that we as consumers want to eat it. So if you use a natural flavor, that natural flavor is colorless. So then they use a synthetic dye to make it look like it's, colored with real fruits,
or
real
artificial
vegetables.
flavor.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it goes on and on and on. And the fact that dyes are in so many children's foods and that it is really pervasive in that you can't really just look at a food and tell that it has synthetic dyes. There are foods like marshmallows have blue one, and spinach wraps. We had an incident with our son, and this was before I went down all of my little rabbit holes, but we had a spinach wrap. It was Mission brand, and it had our son was normally eating like a wheat tortilla, but he ran out. And so I was giving him mine, which I had never looked at the ingredients at that point, and it had yellow 5 and blue 1. And so like we had such a rough week that week. And this was after 6 months of just really, really great behavior. And then it was just the same behaviors we were having before. And we were like, why? Like, what is going on? And it was the spinach wrap. So it really has permeated, so many foods that you wouldn't expect.
We had assumed it was green because of spinach, not because of synthetic food dyes.
Oh, yeah.
Which if you've ever used spinach to color something, like it really colors really well. So that tells you they're using very little spinach to color it if they're having to use synthetic dyes.
Oh, that is so sad. And that brings up another point that it's not just in children's food. They often will dye fish to make the farmed fish look more appealing. And even in like seaweed salad, they use green dye. And so these are more adult foods, right? You're not going to, not all kids like seaweed salad, but just looking at going through the grocery aisles of Costco and how many adult foods have dye in it as well to make it look more appealing. My mom was addicted to red jujubes, and she was, very health conscious, very strict with her diet, but her weakness was red jujubes, and she'd go to the bulk bin and pick out only the jujubes. And for people who don't know what jujubes are, they're like disgusting. I don't know what my mom saw in these things, but they're like kind of like if gummy bears were just a larger blob. and so she would pick out the red jujubes, and she'd have this plastic bag of jujubes in her drawer, but she could only eat them at night because, and this is the wildest thing, she was highly allergic to red dye. And when she ate red dye, she could not do math. Whoa. She could not tell you what 1 + 1 is after she ate a red jujube.
That's crazy.
And so because she needed to she owned her own business. She ran a company, was very successful. And she couldn't, her brain would become inebriated. So she could only eat them at night because by the time she woke up, the effects would have worn off and she could go to work. And she didn't like binge or overeat them. This was like her, few times a month indulgence. But she was so allergic to red dye, she couldn't do math afterwards. And I told my husband this years ago, like 16 years ago. And he ended up eating some kind of artificial food and had this, and he was trying to read blueprints on his job. And he started not being able to do math, and it was artificial dye. There was something he ate with artificial dye, and he had the same experience. And he came home and he said, I had to leave work early because I couldn't read the blueprints. I've read blueprints for 20 years and I couldn't even read them.
It's crazy.
And so sometimes we get poisoned by dye that's in our beverages. Think about Monster Energy drinks, right? That's in our food, or some kind of fast food, or just a wrap. And you might not have put that together. It might go, oh yeah, my brain, you would just go, oh, brain fog. Maybe I need a coffee, or I didn't drink enough, or I didn't drink enough water. I didn't sleep well enough. But if you start to trace the instance of the, wow, I like couldn't do math. Or I couldn't, my brain could not function after lunch every day. What's going on? You start to trace back, and it might be those artificial chemicals, those dyes that they're putting in your food. So yeah, that my mom's experience as a child really woke me up to what is this weird stuff that they're putting in our food. Mm-hmm. And then recently at Children's Hospital here in Seattle, great hospital, kids are flown in from all around because of how good this hospital is. They serve horrible dye in their food. And in their popsicles, the nurses give free popsicles out. And I asked, please give me the list of ingredients before you give that cherry popsicle to my son. And turns out there's red dye in it. And they said, oh, that's weird because we stopped giving kids red Jell-O because we thought they were bleeding to death, So, so we give them green and yellow. I'm like, why are you giving them, dye at all? Well, why are we giving them a carcinogen?
Yeah.
Right. At a children's hospital. Right.
Well, I think for so many people, I don't think they know. And I think many people may have heard, okay, Red 40 may cause, or may be bad for kids that have ADHD, but it's been our experience. And even when we were going through so much with our son, we would go to the doctor and we would ask for help, and we would go to the therapist and we'd ask for help, and no one even suggested a diet change. We just had referrals to a children's hospital. And so I truly believe that we are witnessing a shift. We're witnessing a shift in our community. People are learning about it, and they're eager to learn. And so I really, really hope that our film will be a good talking point for a lot of people, because, really, you obviously have done so much research, and you are very health conscious, and you have a lot of motivation to learn about what's in your food. But for many people, they're just going to their job, and if they haven't learned it in med school, they haven't learned it, whenever they were going to school, that might not be something that they're researching when they go home. But I really do believe that we can see a shift here. And I think that if everyone in their own cities, if we, wrote emails, if we talked about it, every time we went to the hospital, we requested it. And I'm a really big advocate of sending emails and to make your request known, because if they get enough emails, they will make the switch. And so I think that's a really good point to make. I also like the math comment that you made. I think it's really important to note, the OEHA report, which is the most authoritative report on synthetic dyes. It has 27 clinical trials. And it looks at animalistic evidence, in vitro evidence, and they've concluded that synthetic dyes causes hyperactivity, inattentiveness, restlessness, and sleeplessness, irritability, and aggression. But just because that's what's on the report doesn't mean that those are the only issues that it's causing. And so if there are a lot of families that we've heard so many stories, and we've had so many emails and so many people reach out, and they notice that synthetic dyes seem to make epilepsy worse, or my child had rashes, and then we eliminated dyes, and now they no longer have those little chicken rashes on their arms, or my child had Tourette's and we eliminated dyes and now they don't. There are a lot of issues in our food that can affect people differently, and although there may not be $1 million study that has shown that, really what we need to do is we need to eliminate these foods that are not real foods, and we need to go back to eating real foods, because there's no telling what all the impacts that these synthetic dyes are having on our health.
Well, and the truth is too, the dyes that we have in our food system now, they were approved to be in food decades ago, back in the 80s or 70s. Some of these have been approved since 60s. So our science has come a long way, and things like that. But the FDA is not required to reevaluate. They can reevaluate any chemical anytime they want to, but they don't have to, and they just haven't. So then you see things like Red 3 where the reason that Red 3 is allowed in food is because in 1969 it was permanently approved for food use. Because at the time, all the dyes that we have now were kind of on this provisional list where they weren't permanently approved yet, but there was this loophole where companies could request approval for certain dyes. They could petition for it. And so the food and ingested drug industry did that, and they got approval, and Red 3 became permanently approved. For some reason, whenever cosmetics and externally applied drugs petitioned, they required them to do a whole bunch of testing. And then so, a couple decades later, they had some studies that showed that when rats ingested, they ate the Red 3, that they got tumors. And so the FDA themselves, said, okay, these studies show that they cause cancer. And
in 1990.
And this was in 1990. And so we're going to ban them in cosmetics and externally applied drugs. But for whatever
not in the food we're feeding our kids.
They had already permanently approved it. So for whatever reason, they didn't think they could ban it in food at the time. And they've been saying for the past 34 years, they're going to take steps to ban it, but they obviously haven't. And so you see, and we're finally starting to see some states, well, one state in particular, California, in 2023, finally just decided on their own that they were going to ban Red 3 and like 3 other chemicals. And so Red 3 is now, that bill got passed and the governor signed it. And so Red 3 come 2027 will not be allowed in food and drinks in California.
So we've seen about 10 other states that have followed suit with that have their own Red 3 bills. Then also now in California, they have banned, it's on the governor's desk. So if he signs it, California will be the first state to ban synthetic dyes in California public schools.
Wow.
And so you see, like, I feel like it's this lack of responsibility because we also have, there's a clause.
FDA?
The FDA, there's the Delaney clause. So the Delaney clause says that the FDA is not allowed, if they discover any food or chemical causes cancer in humans or animals, that it's not supposed to be allowed in food. So technically they're legally obligated to remove the stuff from the food, but for whatever reason, they just haven't done it. So I think there is a public meeting coming up in September. The FDA has called a public meeting, and I think Red 3 is one of the things they're discussing in that public meeting. So we'll see how that goes. But as of right now, it's still allowed in food in every other state other than California. I mean, it's still technically allowed in California until 2027, but it's promising to see states making these changes. And if this school ban goes through, that's going to be huge because I think other states are gonna jump on that because, I mean, children, they should be our main focus. We should be protecting our youth. The kids they don't really have a choice in what they're eating. They're trusting their parents or their schools to give them food that's healthy. And so I think that'll be really cool. And this bill is the first of its kind. A state has never done this before. So we're excited to see the future of how this goes.
Yeah, pretty interesting. I mean, I'm really grateful that California is leading the way. I don't agree with all of California's politics, but I certainly love a lot of their political choices around health. Like they're the state that has notifications on the packaged goods whether there's a substance that could cause cancer, right? So like heavy metals, there's a lot of heavy metals and lead in packaged food, and you're just like trusting it. People just go, oh, the store sells it, it must be safe.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but like these foods are banned in the EU. They're banned in many of the countries around the world, but they're not banned here. We're allowed to serve people poison in packaged form, and that is wild to me. This is why we have to do our own research and read the labels if we choose to eat processed food. I love that you touched on some of the science, some of the research, and so you touched on a bit of the individual dyes and their health risks. Can we dive deeper into that? Tell us more about the health issues caused by each specific dye, or talk more about the studies.
Actually, so most studies have combined the dyes. So there haven't been, in the U.S., there really haven't been a whole lot of modern studies on each of these. The California report is the most comprehensive report, and what it's done is it's combined a bunch of studies to see its effect. Now in Europe, you had mentioned Europe. We were really curious about why Europe their food standards were so different than ours and why they treated dyes so differently than we did. So we actually, in our documentary, we flew to London and we interviewed the researcher that has conducted the research that has resulted in the warning label in Europe. So that was really interesting to pick his brain. What was really interesting about that study is that it was government funded.
Wow.
So the government paid millions of dollars to have this study done so that they could, make sure that their citizens were safe. And when they caught wind that, these chemicals weren't necessarily safe, then they put a warning label on all the azo dyes. And so what American manufacturers have done, and European manufacturers, is they remove the synthetic dyes, replacing them with natural dyes or real foods like turmeric and things like that, which you can use to color foods as well. And, what's really crazy is that these same American manufacturers, they leave the synthetic dyes here for us in the U.S. So they have reformulated for Europe, and then they've left them here in the U.S. And when we went to London, London is actually no longer in the EU. And we just anecdotally were noticing that a lot of the American companies have chosen, since London has left the EU, this study was a study that was done in the EU. And so London left the EU, so they were no longer, under that, they no longer required the warning label. But the European manufacturers that we saw, they were still synthetic dye free. But the American manufacturers had, they had put the synthetic dyes back in their foods, because we were really excited to find like M&Ms that were dye-free, or like, a name brand product that we had never seen like in real life that was dye-free. So that was pretty shocking.
I wonder if we could go to like a European food store. They have a lot of them around here, and see if we could get some European M&Ms or European, whatever packaged food, and the dye-free version. I know, like growing up in Canada, I did not get to have packaged food. My mom was like, again, a health nut, and I'm so grateful for that and that experience I had. But when I became a teenager, I ate just like all my friends. And in Canada, we have KD, or Kraft Dinner. Here you call it Kraft Mac and Cheese. It's like it looks like it's radioactive, like in the States. It's this really weird artificial yellow color, but in Canada, it's just turmeric, and it's just a beautiful color yellow. It's a different color, different shade. It's just turmeric, and just that is just one comparison of how you cross the border and you can have a healthier version of junk food. Mm-hmm. Why do manufacturers? Is it to save money? Is it because do they make more money? Do they get more sales because there's artificial dye, or does it do they significantly save more money putting a chemical man-made dye rather than just a tiny bit of turmeric in their food?
They definitely save money.
And there's a couple of reasons. There's obviously synthetic dyes are a lot cheaper. Like when you're thinking of the quantity that they're using, over the amount of food they're producing, they are cheaper. Synthetic dyes are also, most natural dyes are not temperature stable or pH stable. So like if you cook with a natural dye, a lot of times it'll change colors or turn brown. Stuff that's naturally dyed doesn't stay as vibrant on the shelf as long. But then also like these companies like really want their food to stay consistent. Like if you in our documentary, we interview Carlin from Just Ingredients, and she's kind of telling us, it's really hard to get a really consistent color when you're using natural strawberries, because every batch of strawberries, can be different. It's hard to get that consistency. So that's another reason they want to keep things the same color, because that's what people are used to. There's a story that happened back in 2015, 16-ish or whatever. There was a small period of time where General Mills had made a commitment to remove dyes from like their entire portfolio of food. They had said they were going to do it, and they tested it with two different. I can't remember the other one, but the main one was Trix. So they took Trix, and one, they had already like changed the shape of Trix. So Trix used to be like little fruit shapes, and I think they might be again now, but they changed them into like the little dog food looking balls. So that was strike one for consumers. And then they pulled the dyes out, and when they did that, people just lost their mind about how, they were ruining their childhood memories, and like they didn't taste the same, or but dyes don't have a taste. But anyway, so General Mills ended up like having this big campaign that the bright colors, they're back. And so they put the synthetic dyes in. So like they're really driven by consumers. And the thing is, that whole fiasco, so that happened with General Mills, it happened with Kellogg's, it happened with Mars Candy. A lot of these companies made these commitments to remove synthetic dyes, but in the process of trying to get there, ran into a bunch of difficulties with that sort of thing. The consistency, the some synthetic dyes or some natural dyes might have a little bit of a taste profile because they're coming from real things.
But that really can't be an excuse because they're doing it for other countries. Mars Candy does not have an excuse.
But the thing is consumers are what control their profits.
Yep.
So if people are buying their food, they're gonna do it. And so originally when they first made the switch, I think sales for Trix, I think they actually went up a little bit. But then over the course of however many months, they started seeing their sales go down, and they started, started losing profits. And so they're like, what did we, I guess they decided let's revert back to what was working before, and they put the synthetic dyes in. But the big thing with that, all these companies that said they were going to do these commitments, they were portraying it as this is a healthier option for people, right? None of them ever touched on the fact that these could be causing problems with behavior or things like that. I think the public would have been a little more receptive if there would have been more awareness around, the negative impacts of these artificial dyes, rather than just like, here's a health, like if you don't think that there's anything wrong with dyes, if you feel like if the government is saying they're safe to eat, why would you care? Why would the general population not want them? You know what I mean? If there's no education around why they shouldn't be in there, then of course they're going to get upset when you change something. We're Americans. We like bright stuff. And
yeah, and I mean, there's some validity to European palate is very different than American palate. Europeans, like when you go to Europe, you don't have aisles and aisles of sugary cereal. That's just not how they eat. So I do think that manufacturers take into consideration, okay, how do Europeans, what do Europeans like to consume? What do Canadians like to consume? But I mean, there's a responsibility there to also protect your consumers. Like, if you know that there is something that's harmful in the foods that you're feeding people, then you obviously should not be using it. And so it's hard for me to believe. I do. One of my best friends, her father-in-law, he was the vice president for a very large American company that uses synthetic dyes, and he genuinely had never heard of these risks. So I do think that there's a lot of people that don't know, but which is why we believe that when our documentary comes out, we have a call to action. People who have seen it and they know the risks, we need to be writing. We need to be talking to these companies. We need to be telling them. We need to be, just getting this information out there so that we can make better decisions.
But at some level, somebody knows because,
of course,
big food, big drink, big candy, all these companies, they're spending tons of money for lobbyists.
Yes.
Anytime anybody tries to make some sort of change, like they're spending a ton of money trying to keep that from happening. So,
and I've actually served, I was on a panel discussion, obviously advocating not to use synthetic dyes. And there were literal lobbyists. I can't remember what company they represented, but they were lobbying for the use of synthetic dyes. And, their argument always is the FDA says it's safe. That on the FDA's website, it says it's safe. On the FDA's website, it says it's safe. Well, on the FDA's website, it also says red 3 causes cancer, but yet it's been in Pediasure all these years.
Oh.
It's in medication that children take daily. I mean, the reality is we should not have to police our own food, but we have to.
We have to.
There's also an organization out there. This is something that one of the researchers or one of the scientists that we interviewed in the documentary, she showed us this. So there's an organization called the International Association of Color Manufacturers, who's like their main goal is to to promote and further the use of dyes of colors. I mean, they also promote natural dyes.
Like we could find their mission statement. It's crazy.
They also promote natural dyes, but their whole thing is like, we want to prove to people that dyes are safe, and there's so many studies that show they're safe. There's also on the flip side, there's so many studies that show they're not safe. But if you go to their member page, their associate members are the Coca-Cola Company, the Hershey Company, Lonzo Consumer Health Incorporated. And I looked at them. They they're kind of in the pharmaceutical world. I think one of the big things they do is make like the capsules for pills and stuff like that. Mars Incorporated and PepsiCo Incorporated. So, I mean, I don't know.
There's a lot of pressure there. And we interviewed the senator that put several bills out, or to put 2 bills out in California, or he supported the bills, sponsored the bills. And he said once the second bill came up, he said that he had people coming into his office telling him, you're going to run us out of business. You know, like we're not going to be able to afford to make this switch. Like, there's a lot of industry pressure there. And if he would have been, you know, a weaker man, or if he would have given into that pressure, then, you know, we wouldn't be here talking about this. He's the reason why we have the California, the OEHA report. So
and the OEHA stands for California Office of Environmental Health Hazards Assessment. So it's part of the California EPA.
Interesting. Yeah, in terms of how these dyes were approved to begin with, you had mentioned like with drugs, it takes usually for a drug to get approved. Now, just remember, every drug that's been taken off the market for killing too many people was first approved.
Yep.
So we just have to remember that we need to question everything and have a healthy distrust of every organization out there.
Well, yeah,
because
exactly.
organizations are out for their best interests and not out for your interests. Having said that, just have a healthy distrust of absolutely everyone. Question everything. Don't question me. Question everyone. Don't believe what people say. Look into it for yourself, right? And don't believe it just because it's on the shelf means it's safe. Just because it was approved means it's safe. Everything that has been taken off the market by the FDA that was once first approved went through the same criteria that approved these dyes, right?
Yep.
So tell us a bit about what did the FDA do? What was their approval process? And now you said it was quite a while ago, 60s, 70s, like, you know, we did definitely have more modern science than we did back then, but what were the safeties? Did they even perform safety studies on animals or humans before approving these, or did they rubber stamp approve these dyes into the food chain?
We just know that there was a process. We don't know what the process was. We just know that there was a process where companies could petition for approval, and it would be granted by the FDA. And these are researchers who are scientists for Center for Science in the Public Interest. So this is part of their daily job. It was just that there was a method or a process where they could petition the FDA, ask for permanent approval. I don't know off the top of my head exactly what that approval process looked like, but I'm sure we could look into that, and that'd be a good question. That'd be a good answer to know for future things.
It's interesting to think about. In order to approve any of these dyes, these artificial dyes in our food, did they have to go through any level of testing, like drugs? So like drugs require, animal testing and then, human trials, right? And so there's multiple trials that takes a few years. When it comes to approving chemicals, man-made artificial chemicals into our food, do they require the same amount of testing, or do they rubber stamp it? Like, oh, you petitioned, okay, we'll let this in. We'll see what it does. If it kills too many people, we'll remove it. So that'd be interesting to know, because if the people who are pro-dye, like the lobbyists, are running around going, well, the FDA said it's safe. Well, okay, but was it just someone with a rubber stamp back in the 70s that said,
right,
that sounds fine, just take this petroleum-based chemical and put it in the food and I'm sure it's fine, or were there actual like animal studies and, and if there were, we would have seen cancer, right? So was it manipulated? Was it rubber stamped? Like what? So it'd be interesting to go back and scrutinize the FDA for approving these dyes that we now know without a doubt are harmful.
Right. Well, and like you said, it's interesting that the FDA is like who is viewed as like the authority on all this, but the FDA is an organization that has a history of, like you said, saying this is safe, this is safe, this is safe, until finally somebody proves this isn't safe. And and then they a lot of times will take steps to ban it. But like you said, how can you trust that this company has done their due diligence in making sure that these things actually are safe? What it seems like to us is they're looking at it as like, well, you're not proving that they're not safe, so I think we're going to allow them. Where that's kind of backwards. I feel like it should be proved to be safe before it's allowed to be in our food. And dyes are one substance, so they are highly regulated. So every single batch of synthetic dye has to send a sample in to the FDA to be tested to make sure they don't have too many heavy metals, or that they have the allowable amount of like carcinogens and heavy metals and things like that. So they know that they are a potentially dangerous substance. But getting off topic of synthetic dyes for just a second, because dyes don't fall under this, but there is a loophole called the GRAS loophole that CSPI is working really hard to try to eliminate. But there is a GRAS, and GRAS stands for generally recognized as safe. Mm-hmm. So a company can introduce a new chemical, they can do their own studies internally, and then they can say that this falls under GRAS. It falls under the generally recognized as safe protocol, and that chemical never gets tested by the FDA. And so that's been even, and so no, dyes are not part of that. And I think sometimes people get confused with that. Like dyes are not, they've never been part of the GRAS list, and they're not, but there are thousands and thousands of chemicals that the FDA has never even looked into that are allowed to be in our food. And it's because of this loophole. And it's pretty crazy. You actually go to the FDA's website, and they have a list of all the chemicals that are part of the GRAS list.
Yeah. And so to circle, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was just, they rubber stamp that. They will go, oh, okay, you put all these chemicals together, and we've approved all these individual chemicals, but we're going to approve this concoction without any testing, because individually or these are so, chemical compounds are so similar to what we've decided is safe that we're going to say this is okay without any testing.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I think the general population assumes if this is allowed in products, then it's been tested to be safe. And I don't think that's always the case.
No. Whitney, you were about to say something?
Oh, well, I was just going to make the point that, the synthetic dyes were approved based on the studies of the time. So if they were approved in the 70s, then they're based on those studies. And the studies in the 70s look very, very different than studies that are modern. So they were not double-blind, placebo tested. Like these were very like archaic studies at the time. And really what the FDA doesn't do is, we're not seeing anyone going back and studying these unless you have, a researcher or a college that has gotten a grant to study this. Like the government is not necessarily paying to go back and test these chemicals to make sure that they're safe.
And like dyes in particular, they have a history of being approved and then eventually being like, I think before
Red 2.
Like Red 2 was one that was banned in the 70s, I think. And the reasons that it were banned are all very similar to the reasons that Red 3 has the issues that it does. And then there was a bunch of dyes that were, I feel like I read a story, I can't remember when it was, but like I want to say the 50s or 60s, it was like some Halloween candy, and all these people were getting sick, and turned out that it was one of the dyes that they were using, and so that dye ended up getting banned. So it's I don't know. I'm not sure what the process was for approval when these were approved, but like we're talking decades and decades ago. So like,
right.
Obviously we know that science has advanced and like testing has advanced, and there is no requirement for them to reevaluate them. So,
and the modern studies and in the researcher, we interviewed a researcher, Dr. Joel Nigg. And what's interesting is he's an ADHD expert, and he went into this expecting to debunk that synthetic dyes had an effect on, neural behavior. And so he was very surprised that the most sophisticated studies showed the greatest result that synthetic dyes, did cause these neurobehavioral effects. So that I think that's something to note, that the studies that are done, the studies that are conducted the best are showing a greater result. And so I do, One would argue, and many scientists would argue, yes, we need to be funding more studies in synthetic dyes. But the reality is we have 27 clinical trials on humans. That's plenty. We know that it causes hyperactivity. It goes much beyond that, which we've already discussed. But, that alone is enough to say, like, why would we want to do this to an entire population? And so for our child, it took our child, this massive jump from, a child that needed a lot of help. He needed a lot of help from his teachers and just a lot of patience to, like, he's doing so well. He doesn't need anything extra. He's in the 99th percentile in the entire nation, like in terms of like academics, like he's doing so well. But for many children, they might be, right there, they have a lot of the symptoms of ADHD. And then external factors like diet and synthetic dyes, they're pushing them over into the area where, they're really struggling now. Or you have somebody who might be gifted and they're right there on the like line where, okay, they could be identified as gifted. And then synthetic dyes are taking them, they're taking them over the threshold of where they'd be identified. So like one of the researchers that we spoke with, he connected it to, like lead exposure. And it's similar in that, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar in that lead, affected it only affected the population just so minutely, but nobody wants to lower the IQ by like less than 1%. Nobody wants to lower the IQ at all. Nobody wants to affect the entire population, that dramatically. And I say that not everyone reacts behaviorally. Obviously, our daughter doesn't react neurologically that we know of to synthetic dyes, but you are moving an entire population when you do that. And whenever you are, affecting so many children and even adults, there haven't been many formal studies on adults, but there have been so many people, including myself, that react to synthetic dyes. So, and like you were saying before, so many people, they might think it's just a bad day or I have brain fog, or, there's a lot that goes on, metabolically, with the things that we consume. And I think some of our issues, even as adults, can be attributed to it.
Yeah. And as you said, there's no benefit. It doesn't affect the flavor. It doesn't affect the quality of the food, right? If anything,
Right.
quality of food's improved by natural dye because you sprinkle a little bit of turmeric on everything. You can't taste it, but put a little bit of beetroot or whatever, right? This is like, we're just going to sprinkle a little bit of nature on things. And yeah, sure, let people kick and scream a bit, but eventually things will settle down, especially if we bring up awareness. And,
Exactly.
and there's going to be a few people who they want to poison their bodies and they'll be pissy about it. But I don't know one single mom who would willingly feed their children poison after being awakened to this knowledge.
Right.
Visit learntruehealth.com/coach to get the new sample class for free from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. It'll come with 5 mobile-friendly interactive health videos as part of the masterclass introduction to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Lectures will be from Dr. Will Cole. Hey, I had him on the show. That was about his book about fiber, and it is actually super interesting. Naturopathic physician that helps support health through supporting gut health, which once you start diving into natural medicine, it all starts in the gut. And Maya Feller, Dr. Andrew Wheel, and more. You're going to learn about somatic breathwork, holistic nourishment, a functional medicine approach. And you will also get to experience the Institute for Integrative Nutrition Health History Intake Form and reflect with personal journal prompts and their career assessment tool as well. You'll be able to see the IIN coaching method in action through a 30-minute video call where you will actually get to see and experience what it's like to be a health coach and also what it's like to be the client of an integrative health coach. So it's a lot of fun. It's interactive. Even if you're not interested necessarily being a health coach, but you're looking for health answers, it's a wonderful program. And it's free to sign up for the sample class. So just go do it and check it out and see what you learn. It's great. IIN, Institute for Integrative Nutrition, I graduated from there and I just love their programs. And when you use coupon code LTH, as in Learn True Health, or mention my name and say, Ashley James sent me from Learn True Health podcast, coupon code LTH, you will get an amazing discount. They, in fact, will give you the deepest discount, deeper than all their sales that they do. And right now they're doing an amazing special for us. The September 23rd class is about to start. So if you're interested, check it out. You can call them and chat with them. In fact, when you talk to them on the phone, you're talking to a graduate of their program. So they'll be able to answer questions. And if you don't want to talk to someone and you want to sign up, you can just go to their website and you can sign up there. Make sure you use the coupon code LTH so you get that huge discount. Remember, the website to go check it out is learntruehealth.com/coach. That's learntruehealth.com/coach.
Well, and that's what we're seeing too. We really are seeing people who really want to do the best for their children. And I think we kind of grew up as a millennial. I can speak for the millennials. I kind of grew up, not reading labels at all. Luckily, I'm from Georgia, so I grew up on a garden, and we knew where our meat came from, and I had less processed food than many people, but we grew up in a time where we didn't really read labels, and now we're noticing we're sick. So many people around us are sick, and we want better for our children. So we are seeing a shift, and I do think that can happen. And podcasts like this, I think, are a really good start.
I think it's important too. Our documentary is focusing on synthetic dyes, but we feel like if you can lock in on something and get as passionate about it as we have, and really tackle one thing at a time. If somebody did something similar to what we're doing about artificial sweeteners or a lot of the other things that are, what I mean? It's really hard to bring a lot of attention if you've got a really broad stroke. I think what's been powerful for us and what we've seen is because we have focused on this one additive, we've seen this community build around awareness for that additive. So I hope that we can inspire people, to do something similar to what we're doing in other areas. And I mean, I don't know what we're going to do after this film comes out. We don't have any plans for what's next, but we've really seen some powerful things happen by locking in and focusing on this additive and becoming, advocates for taking care of this problem. So I think I could see this method that we've used to do this and to create this film. I could see that being done in other areas of the food industry and pharma and all that sort of thing.
I love it. And Brandon, you had brought up earlier some instances in our past where children became very sick from dyes, and then they approved dyes that were approved, made children very sick, and then they took them off the market. And too bad Red 3 isn't just a little bit more poisonous. Just if it just made people a little bit sicker than it does now. It's just it's just the perfect amount of poison that we can chalk it up to, oh, you just have ADHD, let's put you on meds. And that is so frustrating that we know these dyes cause cancer, cause hyperactivity, cause neurological issues, cause immune issues. But the ones that made people really sick, too poisonous. It's like they got the batch wrong. They're like, ha ha ha. I just imagine these evil deep food demons, up in their high towers in New York or something, and they're going, oh, we put a little bit too much poison in that batch. Okay, let's start again. We have to just make it slightly poisonous to keep people sick their entire lives, but not so much poison that they revolt against us, So there's just you have to remember, and I actually interviewed a woman who was a food scientist who helped make one of the types of Doritos. And she said every single packaged food on the market, all those companies have food scientists whose job is to figure out what kind of synthetic crap they need to put in to make your brain addicted to its excitotoxins. And it shocked me when I saw that MSG is in a lot of foods that we feed our children. Maybe that'll be your next documentary, because MSG is an excitotoxin. I've heard that certain people in the Air Force before they go flying, like certain pilots there's a banned list of foods that they're allowed to consume. Obviously, like alcohol would be one of them, but that there's a lot of foods that contain these artificial ingredients because they need to, like if they're flying a jet at like Mach 4, they can't have their brain be hopped up on red dyes and MSG.
Yep.
And it's like, wow, but my kid is, not, I homeschool, but your kid, everyone's kid who goes to school, you send them to school wanting them to be their best learner. Maybe we should like take a page out of the Air Force or the military that doesn't let their pilots consume certain products because they know it hurts the brain.
100%.
Like how wild is that? Like the government knows, right?
Right.
But why do we let these foods be sold? This is why having a free market is both a blessing and a curse, right? Like I see the good in capitalism and the bad in capitalism. This is the bad in capitalism. But here's the thing: we have to vote with our fork. We have to vote with our wallet. You shape individually, we shape, and as a collective, because, like you said, millennials and everyone on social media, we can get together as a collective and we can actually change the food industry. And there's examples of this when there used to be hormones in our dairy, and the hormones got taken out of our dairy because enough of us stopped buying it. It was that is what got it banned. Was enough people said, no, I don't want that one. I'm going to go for the dairy that doesn't have the hormones in it. So we together, if we all stop, read the labels, go to the social media of, I'm going to make sure the social media links are in the show notes, but the To Die For documentary social media, and we scan through all of your graphics where you show like, hey, throw this away and get this brand instead because this is the alternative flavor or whatever that doesn't have the dye. I'd like to know what are the most common, because for many people listening, they might not be aware because they might not have turned over the package and ever looked at the ingredients or look for like does the word always say dye, or are there some like caramel color, like are there, or artificial something? Can you tell us what are the most common names or the names we should be aware of besides if the word dye? And tell us about the most common foods that really shock people that like you had mentioned some marshmallows, but what are some more common foods that children eat?
So synthetic dyes are required by the FDA to be listed with their name, the color, and the number. So we call them number dyes. So the ones there's 9 that are allowed in food, but there's only really 7 that are still used in food. And they are blue 1, blue 2, green 3, red 40, yellow 5, and yellow 6. And so there are some other names for dyes like tartrazine and sunset yellow and stuff like that, but those are actual names for dyes, but those aren't allowed to be used in manufacturing in the United States. Sometimes you will see those in products that are manufactured in another country. So like there might be something that's from Canada. I think Canada, some places in Canada will use like tartrazine and stuff like that. But in the United States, as long as it's manufactured here, there's companies are supposed to follow those guidelines.
According to the FDA website.
Yeah.
And so some surprising places that, or some surprising foods that have synthetic dyes are marshmallows, fortune cookies, grain bars, some canned fruits, especially if it has cherries, obviously candies, chips, mac and cheese, although there are a lot of like dye-free options now. One really surprising place for that we found synthetic dyes are in vanilla icing and chocolate icing. At the time that we eliminated synthetic dyes from our son's diet nearly 3 years ago, all of the vanilla and the chocolate icings at our local stores that you could just walk into, and we don't have a Whole Foods where we live or a Trader Joe's or anything like that. So we would just walk into like Walmart and Kroger, and we could not find a vanilla or chocolate icing that did not have dyes in it.
Wow.
Now you can. Now they're starting to diversify. Some pickles, cinnamon rolls, sadly, lots of ice cream, lots of baked goods, a lot of baked products that have berries in it oftentimes like muffin products will not have actual berries. I mean, I don't know what they are honestly, but they're colored with dyes. So, pancake mixes, oftentimes, not all. Sadly, movie popcorn.
Yeah.
That was a sad one.
Mm.
Many antibiotics.
Well, and at the movie theater, what has dye in it is the little salt stuff that they use, that orange salt that they use to actually make it look like it's yellow. That's what has the dye in it.
Yeah.
But then digging even deeper, like many hand soaps, even if it's clear, they oftentimes have dyes.
Oh, weird.
Lots of toothpaste, nail polish, makeup, things like that. So our daughter does dance, so we have to buy the super bougie makeup for her.
A lot of people are like,
keep her safe.
why are you so worried about stuff like external exposure? And we weren't at first. We didn't even think about it until we went out to eat one day with our son. This is, a few months after we had realized that dyes were an issue and he was doing great. We went out to eat to a restaurant and they gave him a little temporary tattoo. And we're like, oh, this is cool. Let's put it on. And we put it on. And then like, while we were at the restaurant, he like lost his mind. He got really upset because he was still little and Whitney was going to take him to the bathroom and he really didn't want to go to the girls' bathroom. He like lost his mind and started hitting her and like doing, it was crazy. And we're like, what is going on?
Like it was so.
We checked his food.
different.
We were like, is there anything in this ketchup? Like, what is going on? And then like it like clicked. Oh, well, we put a big blob of ink on his skin.
Yeah. Well, it is important to note that there haven't been any formal studies, but just anecdotally, us along with thousands of other parents have noticed that.
They have done those studies where it shows that like sunscreen can get into your bloodstream from dermal exposure. So like,
but none on synthetic dyes.
yeah, none specifically on synthetic.
But I mean,
But we have seen it. Like if he'll come home from school and there's just something off, and you'll look at his hands, he got marker all over his hands. So like, we've seen that. It definitely affects our son. So we assume that he's not the only one out there. But
He's not. This is wild. Yeah. Yeah, you got to be careful because we think our skin is like impenetrable and it's crazy. No, you absorb things with your skin. Like you really need to be careful with your cosmetics.
it's the largest organ of your body.
Yeah. And earlier you had mentioned a few of the ingredients, like you talked about heavy metals. What are artificial dyes? Are they
question.
petroleum based? Are there heavy metals in them? Like we know that they're man-made, we know they're chemicals, but like what are they?
So I think originally I think they were derived from coal tar, which is like a byproduct, and then that's kind of shifted to a lot of them are petroleum based. They're made from byproducts of petroleum. And I think you have like the azo dyes that gets a little into the science more above what I actually understand, how the actual azo bonds and stuff work. But yeah, they're either chemically made or derived from petroleum and things like that. That's not things that you typically would want to be ingesting.
When you traveled around and did all these interviews for the documentary, which I'm so excited to watch when it comes out with everyone, tell me one of the most shocking things from each of you. I want each of you, hopefully you each have a different, what is the most like where you said no way and your like jaw hit the floor? What is the most shocking thing you learned while you were conducting all these interviews?
For me, I went into this very green. And part of the reason why I did that is if we were going to create a documentary, I wanted to come at it from just an everyday consumer standpoint. So I didn't want to dig so deep into the research that I was asking higher level questions. And so once we decided to make a film, I stopped looking at the research at all so that I would have just these very basic questions, because our documentary is not for people who are already super crunchy and know everything about reading a label. We really want this documentary to be for everyone, whether you have any background knowledge or not. So it was shocking to me to sit in our first interview and for the researcher to explain that synthetic dyes are a chemical. And I know we just discussed that, but that was incredibly shocking to me. I had never even considered that there could be chemicals in our food. So that was definitely eye-opening. But also, we're talking a lot about science, but our documentary is 50% or more, probably closer to 55% story. So we flew around the U.S. and we interviewed these families, and the stories we heard were shocking. And I mean, the stories kept flooding in. And so We had one mom, her son was 7 and he was suicidal because of synthetic dyes. And I know that sounds crazy, and that's almost like, I'm sure I have a few people like cocking their heads like, really? But synthetic dyes he was so sensitive to these synthetic dyes that it was wreaking havoc on him. And so that story was obviously crazy. I mean, each one was different. One of our stories, the little girl was, she was very young, so they could not formally diagnosed her as having bipolar disorder, but she was having so many issues that the doctors said, we're looking at bipolar disorder, and, the only thing that's going to help you is, medication. And so each of the stories that we followed, to see them turn back around and they're like, we have, a child, a full healthy child, only because we eliminated synthetic dyes. And many of these families, some of these families went even deeper and now they eat very clean, but most of them, they just eliminated synthetic dyes. So it was shocking that just this one ingredient could have such a dramatic impact on not only their health, but their family, their entire families. They were struggling. The moms were struggling. Their marriages were struggling. It was just such, it was hard to hear. So those were my shocking stories.
And the story that she's talking about Dr. Rebecca Bevins, and Dr. Bevins actually has a TED Talk that is the gateway for a whole lot of these people that have been part of our group. Like, that was one of the first videos that they have ever seen, was this TED Talk that she did specifically about her son. So she figured out synthetic dyes were an issue for him when he was around.
She's a neuroscientist.
6 or 7, and so you were asking earlier about like what does each specific dye do. So like there's no studies on there's not a lot of studies on individual dyes, but she did do her own individual like test with her son. So if you listen to her TED Talk, her TEDx talk, she for at least for him and how he reacts, she kind of breaks down each color. So that's a good thing to listen to.
I have a friend whose daughter had seizures, and they saw a neuroscientist and was prescribed a medication, because seizures for children can cause brain damage. The more you have the seizures, the more you're really deteriorating. And so it's not one of those things where you're like, oh, just let them flop it out, it's fine, they'll grow out of it. Like, no, we really need to prevent seizures. And the dye was in the red dye. I just remember her saying there's red dye in her medication. She can't take this. We need to find a dye-free alternative. And at the time I was like, just give her the med. Like, I was almost like, just give her the meds. Like, we need to like stop the seizures. Like, not that, I was desperate for her to have a quality of life because the seizures were so bad for her. But that was just a little part of me is just like, just give it to her. It's such a small amount. How could that make a difference? Mm-hmm. It's a tiny, tiny it's just a little tiny bit of red dye. But what you're sharing is, it doesn't matter if it's a tiny bit, especially for epileptics. Mm-hmm. It increases epilepsy. Why would they put something in the epilepsy medication that increases epilepsy? This is how Big Pharma works. This is like, we're going to like say we're helping you, but we're really going to like harm you at the same time. So you really need our meds. Oh my gosh, that is so disgusting. That's so irresponsible. And it's either maniacal or it's ignorant. But either way, we're trusting our health with this giant, industry that is either, and I feel it's a combination of both ignorance and those who know are just don't want to help. Like, it's maniacal. There's evil, and then there's the ignorant. Mm-hmm. And it can't be anywhere in between. But these are the people we trust our health with.
Yeah, you say that about the epilepsy medicine. I'm going to let Whitney tell a very heartbreaking story about that. But then also the same sort of thing. So a lot of times synthetic dyes can cause, it doesn't cause ADHD, but it can cause ADHD type symptoms.
Yes.
And so we do feel like there's probably a lot of like false diagnosis, like for ADHD. Now, of course, there are people with ADHD and dyes can make their ADHD worse, but I do feel like there's also some cases of people that maybe don't have ADHD that get prescribed ADHD medicine. And a lot of the ADHD medication also has dyes in it. So,
well, and even in the OEHA report, it says that eliminating synthetic dyes is more effective for treating ADHD than other non-drug treatments for ADHD.
Oh my God.
So there's a lot of evidence for that. But it was crazy you even brought up epilepsy and epilepsy medication, because the most heartbreaking story I was sent, I think it was on social media. This mom was telling me that her daughter has epilepsy. And like you said, if you know anything about epilepsy, it's nothing to mess with. Like, each seizure can dramatically impact your brain. And so her daughter had an allergic reaction to Red 40. So the only other medication had Red 3, which we know causes cancer. So every single day, her daughter is taking a life-saving medication that is also laced with Red 3, which can cause, we know that it can be genotoxic. We know that it causes cancer in rats. And so the fact that she's consuming it every day, I mean, that just throws everything out of the water. Like, these people that are just like, you can just take a little bit every once in a while. These poor kids are taking it every day. And so, like, it can have dramatic impacts. And we have really a passion for me. I mean, so I have so many passions with synthetic dyes, but first and foremost, I really don't believe it should be in schools. I don't believe that it should be in school foods. I don't believe that it should be in government-funded snacks. But I also don't believe it should be a medication. And I think that, if candy can figure it out, if other industries can figure out how to naturally dye things, I think pharma has enough money and enough brain power to figure out how to do that naturally. And so I really, really would urge advocacy groups, CSPI we've been working with. I've sent so many emails. I'm like, can we work on this now? Because I really think the pharmacy side is honestly the most, one of the most heartbreaking parts for me, because these children can't take anything else. It is life-saving. And like you said, like, you have to take it. And of course, I would encourage my friends to also, like, yes, your child needs this medication, but I would be sending a lot of emails. I would probably have a loop in my inbox, like, asking them to take it out and sending reports to them and sending research. But yeah, it's crazy. It's sad.
That is so sad. What you said, Brandon, about misdiagnosis, this is what I've seen so many times with mental health issues also. So, like, ADHD, but also, like you mentioned, bipolar. One of my mentors is a naturopathic physician who saved my life. He's an amazing man. And he is the reason why I no longer have all the diseases I had. And he's the reason why I went from infertility to having our wonderful son naturally. And so I've learned a great deal from him over the last many years since I've been following him since 2011. And he has a lot of times people come to him as a last resort. This is what happens with holistic medicine, naturopaths. People, like, go the traditional, MD route. And I hate that it's called traditional, because it's like less than 100 years old, really. We call that conventional, just like conventionally grown food. It's like, is the pesticide laden food, but organic is the alternative food. I'm like, no. Organic is what we used to do
Organic's
before
the
you.
OG.
Yeah, organic should be called conventional, because that is how we used to grow food. But it's all, if you read any of Orwell's books, like 1984, you get the whole, like, manipulation. They use words in a manipulative way, especially, this is a political year. You're hearing it from every politician, regardless of what side you're on. You really, like, listen through the filter of, like, detecting the linguistic fallacies and the linguistic manipulations. And so a lot of people would come to my mentor, Dr. Joel Wallach, after they have been lied to and gone through the route of the drug-based medicine and come out the other end sicker, and with most often misdiagnosed. And he would help them through food and supplements to fill up their nutrient tanks where they're missing certain nutrients. And then their symptoms would go away. They would no longer be bipolar, or they would no longer, have ADHD. And he's like, well, you weren't actually in the first place. You were misdiagnosed. You had all the same expressions that someone with that would, but you actually, this is how eating the wrong way, like, it's like you took a car and you gave it the wrong fuel and the wrong oil, you just gave it the wrong everything. And then you're like, my car has these symptoms. oh, your car must have this problem. Let's, so it's the same. It's like we're giving our bodies crap and expecting ourselves to be healthy with crap. Most people don't think that every single bite they put in their mouth turns into cells, right? Like, do you
Right.
really want to turn
That's
that Big
right.
Mac into your cells? Like, do you really want to turn that Frappuccino into your cells? Because that's what you're putting in your body. And if you don't give the raw building blocks to your body, or if you give the wrong ones, then your body just breaks down. There's inflammation, it just breaks down. It's like you're building a beautiful 2-story house for your family, and you've got all the crew, the workers show up, but instead of lumber, it's like half the lumber you need plus a bunch of bouncy houses. Like, it's just things that you don't need. And that's what we're doing. We're feeding ourselves bouncy houses instead of the lumber it needs to grow new healthy cells. And then why are we putting artificial man-made chemicals, petroleum-based chemicals, just microdosing them in everything? They're in everything if you eat packaged food, both, and drugs and cosmetics, and the list goes on. And we're going to learn so much more about it. I love that you came at it from a really fresh perspective as you dove into your journey. So we get to go on this journey with you. So I'm so excited for your documentary. It's gonna come out soon. Tell us about how this works, because listeners get to go to your website, sign up for your newsletter so they can hear about how it's coming out, where they can watch it. Do you expect that it's going to be in any theaters, or are we going to stream it online? Like, just tell us about the process of how we'll be able to watch your movie when it comes out.
Yes. So we are in the process. The film is done. We've right now our lawyer has the film. She's just going over it. We've kind of done a clearance check. We've gotten a little bit of feedback on there, just a couple little things here and there that we need to tweak. And we're in the process of negotiation with a distributor, which a lot of people have no idea what that means. But a distributor is basically a company that puts your film into the marketplace. And you can self-distribute. We're kind of at like max capacity of what we're capable of doing and bandwidth that we have. We've been doing this for 2 years, and it's just the two of us. So we feel like a distributor was the best route for us. So once we get that deal worked out, we don't have a exact date set, but our goal, what we envision for the film, is to release it early January. A couple of reasons behind that. We thought we wanted to release it in the fall originally, but this being a political year, we don't want to risk like getting buried and all that's going on in the election and things like that. And then right after that, we have Christmas. So we're like, well, this film could really be a good New Year's resolution type thing. So we feel like January is going to be a sweet spot for us. And I think that's when I think that'll be a great time for people to watch it. So what you can do is to keep up with it is we have a special subscriber, like a little spot on our website. If you go to dieforthedocumentary.com/podcast, that's not plural, just podcast, PODCAST.
And it's DYE.
Yeah, die is DYE. So to die for the documentary, DYE.com, and then /podcast. You can subscribe there to our email list. That's helping us keep up with anybody who discovered us through listening to a podcast, and we can keep you updated. We have a bunch of resources that we send to you, and you can kind of keep up with where we're at with the film. We like to send out a newsletter, and you can also join you can follow the film on Facebook, follow the film on Instagram, and then we also have, like I said, we have that really big group on Facebook called Die Free Family Swaps Recipes and Resources, and you can also follow that.
Love it. Yeah. So you and I, before we hit record, we were talking about the timing. So I'm like, just launch it. Just go. Just just let us watch it now. And then you explained to me, well, political year and get buried and all that stuff. But I love that you said January, health, everyone kind of has their minds on New Year's resolutions and being healthier. And they have a hangover from 2 months of sugar from October 31st to January 1st. They're just like, it's ridiculous. We really overindulge. And here's a little thought for you to noodle around with.
Okay.
Flu season happens to coincide with sugar season. I just want you to think about that, because a single teaspoon of sugar actually causes, I can't remember which white blood cell, there's names for the different white blood cells, but there's one particular white blood cell that actually falls asleep and like does not function when you eat even a single teaspoon of processed sugar. And go down that rabbit hole. So maybe that's your next documentary, but go down the rabbit hole, processed sugar, and how it drastically negatively impacts the immune system. And just so happens that we have quote unquote flu season every year when everyone's eating the most amount of sugar just possible. And sugar's hidden in everything, all the holiday food. So
there's a great sugar documentary called Fed Up. I think it came out in 2014.
Yeah.
Really good documentary.
Yeah, I love it. I just love health documentaries, because actually it was a health documentary that really got me started on I was sick and suffering for many years, and I think it was Food Inc. back in 2008, and it was something that the original founder of Whole Foods said, shop the perimeter of the grocery store,
Yeah, we've heard that.
buy organic, and he said, vote with your fork. And so my husband and I took that challenge on, and in 1 month, my chronic infections went away, and I got off of the constant antibiotics I was on. And that was just one of my health issues. But if I'm like, wow, I just did one thing I just shopped the perimeter of the grocery store. I didn't even I was still eating dairy and meat and, whatever. But I shopped at the perimeter of the grocery store, ate organic, and I was voting with my fork. So I'm like, okay, organic is good. I want to vote with my fork. And my chronic infections went away. I thought, gee, what else could I impact if I made more changes, right? And so that was back in 2008 that started me down that road. And here I am. That's why I'm doing this podcast, because I want to get this information out there, because people are needlessly suffering. There's parents who, like you said, their entire marriage, their entire lives are affected because their children are being poisoned by something that is right underneath their nose, and they don't even know it. Mm-hmm. They don't even know that it's there. In the meantime, while we're waiting for January for your documentary to come out, in the meantime, we can go to your Instagram. We don't have to wait to start learning now, to start making changes now. Let's all become a success story of Whitney and Brandon. Let's go to their Instagram, go to their social media, and check out the posts, because I've learned a lot. I was like, oh, I didn't know that food had dye in it. I didn't know that food had dye in it. And you'll see what you can do instead. You can trade this for that. You'll learn so much by going through their social media, follow them, get in their Facebook group. What's the Facebook group called?
So it's Dye-Free Family Swaps, Recipes, and Resources.
Wonderful. So we'll make sure the links are in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com, and follow them, whatever social media that you are on, but especially get on their email list, and I'll make sure the link is there to dieforthedocumentary.com. And then we'll become aware. And the thing is that even if you eat really clean, or maybe even if you don't have kids, or your kids have grown up, there are people you're gonna touch people's lives. So just speaking to every single listener, you could, with this new information that you have today, you could actually change the course of someone's life, because there's a child who is not doing well in school right now, or feeling suicidal, or, the parents are maybe on the brink of a divorce because dyes are in their life. And if you bring this information, if you share this episode with everyone around you, especially parents with young kids, you could actually change the trajectory in a positive way of every single person that listens, because the parents will have a better time, be able to be great parents. The child will feel like healthy and normal again, and go on to lead a healthy and productive life, and not be super duper medicated because they got misdiagnosed with something like ADHD, or they have ADHD and now their ADHD is healthfully under control because it's not exacerbated by these dyes. So please share this with everyone. We need to, as a collective, get this crap out of our food, because it is nothing but poison. It has no health benefits. It has no benefit at all, and it only is a negative. Why are we accepting this as a species? Why are we accepting this as humans? So put your foot down, say no more. I will not support. Never buy something with dye. Don't vote for that. Put your foot down. I say no to those freaking cookies at the Chinese restaurant. I pop
Fortune cookies.
Yeah, thank you, fortune cookies. I
Maybe
pop
I'll-
them open. I like reading the fortunes because it's fun, but I pop them open and I'm like, here, throw that in the trash. You don't need to eat that. But it's wild because even if people are choosing to be dye-free, it's the little things like the free cookie or the little free mint or, the little cosmetic thing. It's just, or like wash your hands. It's just the little things. It can seep in. We have to take a stand and say no and get it out, especially for the children, because it really, really hurts them, their brain and their immune system. Thank you so much for dedicating your time, your energy, your life for the last few years to this project. It's very meaningful and it is helping millions of people. So thank you for what you guys are doing.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we wrap up today, is there anything else you want to share? Anything that we didn't touch on? A story you want to leave us with? Is there anything you want to make sure you share to wrap up today's interview?
Well, I love what you were just saying about, sharing this with people, because like when you really get down to the core of why we're making this film, one, we're Christians. We feel like God has given us abilities for a reason to use those for good. And as Whitney started going down this rabbit hole, Whitney was a public school teacher at one point, and so she taught in a high poverty school, and so she really had a heart for those parents. She had parents like kids in her class that multiple children shared a room or shared a bed or slept on the floor, and she had parents that didn't even speak English or couldn't read, and so like parents like that, looking for synthetic dyes and reading labels, that's not something that's not even part of like what they do. Like, so we really feel like we made this film, obviously we want people who already know this information to get something out of it, but we really made this film to have something that's easily digestible, easy to understand, and easy and something that you can share. Like you said, we hope for a domino effect. What's going to make this film successful is when somebody watches it and says, I know somebody that can benefit from watching this, and I'm going to pass this along. So I like how you gave everybody that call to action. I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. And Whitney, do you have any parting words for us?
Yeah, that was actually the point I was going to make. That we really, as much as, the reality is the demographics of people that are really looking into this and digging into the research with synthetic dyes, they're not families that are in low income. And so the people that are in low income and women of childbearing age, this is according to the WEHA report, synthetic dye exposures are higher among women of childbearing age with low incomes. Additionally, non-Hispanic Black women of childbearing age and children of the same age group has significantly higher intakes compared to children of other ethnic groups. So the reality is we really need to be protecting, not only our children, but all children. And so our hope is that, as a society, that we kind of go back to our roots and that we start protecting children, and especially children that, have no other option. And so we live in a very high poverty area. We live in the carpet capital of the world. So we have a lot of industry, and we have, just a lot of people who are just making it. And so you work night shifts, both parents are working 2 jobs, and a lot of children in our area are taking care of siblings or being raised by siblings. And the reality is they're not reading labels. They're not ever going to see this research. And so we do need to be protecting those children. Those children matter. Those children are the most vulnerable. So that is really our heart. So that was the point I was going to make. I don't know why I'm getting emotional.
No, it is. It's very emotional. Like you said, these are the most vulnerable, and it is really up to us, everyone. I'm also Christian, and I believe that it is our duty. We're supposed to protect the most vulnerable. Like, we are supposed to protect those from these atrocities and it's a poison that is so ubiquitous and is not even seen. It's just hidden, and we need to bring it. We need to shed light on it, and by those who can, those who are listening now, by our actions, we can help by you said, writing the letters, taking action, right? Voting with your fork, helping spread this information, getting informed and helping spread this information. We can get these dyes out of our food, and that would also help those children as well. But the more we share this information, the better. And the more we make it accessible to eat foods that are dye-free, the better. So if you're donating to a food bank, donate foods that are dye-free. Call up the food bank, inform them. Call up all your local food banks and the churches that have food banks in them, and let them know that we want to make sure that, because a lot of churches, especially in my area, they raise money and then they go buy the food. One of my churches used to get food for free for their food bank, and then because of political differences, the people, the company that was giving them free food said, "We're not going to give you free food because you have Christian values." And so I'm like, okay, well, you knew it was a church, but whatever. and we could, but like, these are well-meaning churches, well-meaning food banks. And if you give them this information and show them and make it easy for them, like, okay, instead of buying this brand, buy this brand. Instead of buying this, buy this. Give them a list. Here's the list of foods that have these dyes that are hurting children. Here's the list. Very similar foods, similar cost. Get this instead. It's going to make a difference in their lives. So think about and reach out to local schools. Talk with the superintendent. Talk with the principal. Can you get your child's school to go dye-free? To go to take on this mission. Pick a school, pick a food bank, pick something you care about somewhere in your community, and go after it and share this information. And if we get enough, like you said in your Facebook group, it's like 500,000 people. Can you imagine if 500,000 people went out and shared with 3 other people, and those people shared with 3 other people? Like, it's doable. Just go share with 3 other people, and then charge them with the idea of sharing with 3 other people. It's doable. Share this episode with as many people as you can, and ask them to share with as many people as they can. But even if it's just 3 people, that multiplies like crazy, and we could get this information out there. But then take on, like, if you're moved by that concept that there's children suffering, especially in lower income areas, and children raising children, we need to help them too. And getting this information out there, and also getting the companies to stop it, then we can hopefully make a difference. And I believe we can, because I've seen it happen before. I've seen the food industry turn around because enough people said no.
That's right.
So I think you are sparking a fire, but we have to take the ignition and run with it. All of us, every single one of us. You know that Horton Hears a Who? Do you remember that? This is the Horton Hears a Who. It's a wonderful children's story by Dr. Seuss, and in order to save this entire civilization, every single person in Whoville or whatever there are needed to yell at Horton, the giant elephant, who their whole civilization would have died, and they had to get everyone involved, every single voice. Luckily, it doesn't take the entire population to make a change. I bet if we got 10% of America, 10%,
for sure,
it would be enough of a loud yell to change the industry. So really, we do make a difference when we share and we get this information out there, because no mother and no father would willingly give, and no sane and loving mother and father would willingly give a poison to their child, especially that makes their life like harder. Like, yeah, I want my kid kicking and screaming and fighting with me and biting. Yeah, like, here, eat this cookie. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I can't wait to watch the documentary. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I love that. That was great.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview. It was so informative. Share this episode with those you care about. We got to spread this information. It's a must. It's just a must that we know this. Just like back when we learned that x-rays were not something we should just have in shoe stores. You may not know that. X-ray machines used to be in shoe stores, and people would just x-ray themselves all the time just while they were trying on shoes. And then we found out that we might want to limit how many x-rays we get, right? And then there was the lead in gasoline, and then we found out that wasn't healthy and we got to take that out. And then there was asbestos, and then there was lead paint, right? And so we think about, there's DDT that we used to douse onto children, and it was so bad it mimicked polio symptoms. That's going down a whole other rabbit hole. But basically, if we look back 30, 40, 50 years or more, we will see where things were once acceptable, safe, and on the shelves, sold in stores, right? And then we learned some new information, and that information had to spread to the masses, and then change happened. Coca-Cola used to contain what is now an illegal substance, right? And that was a fun drink. You could go to the Five and Dime and get yourself a nice Coca-Cola and get some illegal substance served to you as a fun little treat. We learn, we do better. Hopefully we learn and do better. And sometimes it takes longer because we don't spread the information fast enough, and lobbyists happen and companies fight back. Think about cigarettes. Honestly, that there's substances still that we know better, and yet they're available to be sold. So we just need to spread this information so that we can save people and change lives doing it. And as you heard me share before about the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, it's an incredible opportunity to check out their free course and also check out the class that is starting soon. So if you're interested in becoming a health coach or just checking out the free training, go to learntruehealth.com/coach. And when you sign up, use coupon code LTH, you're going to get a great discount. And this cohort is starting, classes are starting September 23rd. And even if you're super busy, you can fit it into your schedule. If you have time to listen to my podcast, you have time to become an integrative health coach through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and rock your world, bringing joy and clarity and fulfillment to every area of your life. IIN is not just about what you eat. It's about examining and uplifting and bringing joy into every single area: mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, friendships, community, connection. It really is about living a full life and then learning how to help others do the same. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, you're going to want to check it out. learntruehealth.com/coach, coupon code LTH.